I didn't realize you guys were going to do a lot of highbrow quotes, so I didn't come fully prepared. So the only thing I can think of right now is from Ricky Bobby, if you ain't first, you're last. And I think hopefully at the end of this session today, you're gonna see why we think that Tezos is gonna be the last blockchain, or we'll be first. So I'll get the questions started. Hopefully we'll have a lot of questions from the audience. There was a lot of interesting presentations, so I'm sure you have a lot of questions. Good leaders have vision and inspire others to help others, or inspire others to help turn that vision into reality. So I guess, how do you get people to buy into your vision? And more importantly, how do you get them to stick with you, when the going gets tough? What's the secret sauce?
I don't know anything about hard times. Tezos has just been a cakewalk, and that's my story. I'm taking to do it. No, I mean, I think it's funny being at Draper U because Tim's participation in Tezos basically started off in this basement and then worked its way upstairs over the course of 15 minutes. I met with his son Adam, and I told him all sorts of crazy ideas about what I saw as Tezos is doing and the provocative vision around governance, so on and so forth. And Tim really loves big ideas that can change the world. I guess there's good ROI in that, but also he's definitely really passionate about the vision that technology can change in the world. And I just think kind of anchoring to big ideas and really, at the end of the day, believing that what you're doing is impactful and can change the world will get you a lot of buy-in with people if you're very sincere in your convictions. So that seems to be what's carried Tezos quite a bit of the way is, underneath all the talk about formal verification and, the ticky-tacky and though fascinating engineering bits about it, is a really fundamentally powerful idea that we can distribute power across the globe and exchange value with people who we've never met before in a fun and interesting and new way. So thinking big, I think, helps a lot. Makes up for a lot.
Anybody else have any words of wisdom?
Well, I think a big part of it is communicating things to people in a way that feels tangible and giving people something actionable to do. This has been, I think, the large challenge with cryptocurrencies, as I mentioned. Working on Bitcoin starting in 2015 professionally, there wasn't really a whole lot you could do other than hold Bitcoin, and that's not necessarily that motivating or exciting. So you have to find ways to make the idea tangible to people. That's why I think narratives are really important. There's a great set of writing that's been done around all of the changing narratives or stories that we tell. I mean, at the end of the day, the way that human history has always worked is through incentives and through storytelling and through community. And so it's been interesting to see for me is how the cryptocurrency ecosystem and how the Tezos ecosystem is going to start telling stories. I don't think we've seen a lot of that yet, but I'd love to see more stories emerge, more people emerge that are speaking about sort of large picture ideas rather than that nitty-gritty that Kathleen mentioned. That all that work's been done, it's getting done. There's a lot of interest in it, but I think at a high level, seeing more people who have big, audacious, bold visions for how we can use these tools is really necessary to get the next million, the next 5 million, the next 10 million people interested in what Tezos is.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing I'd add to that is, the great thing about Tezos, and I think the reason why a lot of us became interested in it, is that it's a very tech-first project, right? And so, we know we have best-in-class tech that's appealing to a lot of people, but the crypto space is just full of hype, and we don't have to necessarily go about it in the same way. But to Meltem's point, if we don't start telling our story in a way that doesn't solely focus on the tech and starts focusing more on the applications, I think that's what helps bring the vision to life and sell the product, I guess, so to speak. And so to the extent that we can do that, not just amongst ourselves, but the larger crypto community and then beyond that, because I think the information, I don't know about you guys, but the information delta between the people inside cryptocurrency and outside cryptocurrency is just widening by the day. And so I feel to the extent that we can try to bridge that gap, that helps to bring the vision to life.
All right, thanks. So maybe I'll reach out to the audience. I see lots of hands going up, as I suspected. So Jovan, if you can maybe pass the mic around. We got quite a few questions here.
I'm Elliot. I'm a smart contract developer. I guess I want to know what what's going to make people use Tezos to build smart contracts on? Because I've been developing these applications for a while, and it doesn't seem like that there's a very clear use case except for financial assets. Like a lot of things that you would want to build kind of aren't really possible because of privacy and like scaling and just a lot of other things that you just really wouldn't want everyone to see. So what's going to set Tezos apart from all the other smart contract platforms that are trying to become the next big thing?
Well, I'll just say one thing, and then I'll leave it to these guys to answer that question. Financial assets, like asset issuance, is like not a small thing. So that would be good. But I'll leave it to these guys to really answer the question.
Yeah, like I think money's a pretty great app, you know, like we all use it every day. You know, I think fundamentally this stuff is meant to address value exchange over the internet. And so I think financial applications, financial use cases are plenty enough. In fact, I find most other applications of this technology to be either superfluous or just like not that interesting. So that's the camp I'm in, you know, which is not exactly the most awe-inspiring thing, but, you know, fact of the matter is I think that this technology is the best tool for the job in a lot of decentralized finance applications. I struggle to see other use cases.
And I'll take that one step further. So as someone who started her career in finance and now spends a lot of time trying to figure out how to integrate crypto markets into legacy financial markets, I think Tezos from a sort of not just a technology standpoint, but from a design standpoint, fits most easily into existing legacy finance infrastructure. I think the language that was chosen, the way the protocol was constructed, it's much easier for someone to understand Tezos and its history than it is for someone to understand some of these other protocols that are extremely complex and cumbersome. I think the second piece is, to me, one of the interesting things is actually governance. There is a massive issue in finance related to corporate governance, particularly. And we're now entering an age where we're seeing, I mean, here I'm just gonna sound like a crazy person, but I'll let my freak flag fly. I believe that we're seeing kind of a dawn of people associate less and less with physical nation states. We now see the rise of mega corporations that are becoming their own states effectively. Look at Facebook and their plans to issue Facebook coin. They're going to develop their own payment infrastructure, their own financial infrastructure. So I see this evolution from people, you know, defining themselves by association with the physical state to association with a digital state or a corporate state and expressing that online and in the digital realm. So that's where I think it's not just Tezos uniquely, but I think everything in the world is going to be financialized. That's what we're doing with smart contracts. And so if we're going to financialize everything, we're going to need a whole lot of plumbing to do that. And so that's where I'm excited about it.
Yeah. And to be clear, like, you know, Tezos has limitations the same way every smart contract platform has limitations today. I would argue that Tezos has better bones to actually tackle new innovations as they come to market, you know, whatever form that takes, to either be a quick second mover or the first people to take advantage of tried and true technologies that are tested. So, you know, it's great to see this in tandem with the you know, first vote on Tezos. You'll see like seamless upgrades, hopefully, and the ability to actually instantiate and fold in new innovations much more quickly. So, you know, it's still in its nascence. Like, I think the whole theme that we could all hammer home if we could is that we're really in the beginning stages of something that we think will be big. Obviously, that's why we're super enthusiastic, and again, here on a Saturday. But you know, point being, like, you know, Tezos, I think, recognized that very early on, that this is like right in the beginning, and as a result, you know, we're calibrated towards being able to fold in things as they become more useful.
Will you be able to upgrade your VM and add more opcodes as you go?
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay, Jovan.
Are there specific opcodes you want?
Well, I don't know, but I just think that
Like you
not-
have this smile on your face, like you look excited.
well, there's all sorts of things that I would like to see built into smart contract platforms that I don't see yet, and so a platform where you don't have to hard fork is cool.
We agree.
Yeah.
All right, there is a few more hands over here. Maybe we start in the front row, Jovan.
Hi. First, I'd like to say it is fantastic, in my opinion, to see the women so deeply involved in the sector that is totally dominated by men. So I really appreciate that. Second, I'd like to address, Allison, one of the things that you said that I've been saying for a long time. language is extremely important. And one of the constant things, in fact, we've heard it here today, is that blockchain enables trustless transactions. And what you said, I think, was perhaps one of the most spot-on things that was said today, which is basically we're still human. Well, I've been saying that for 5 years. When I first heard blockchain, trustless transactions, there's no such thing. But I don't know what's going to solve this problem, and I agree that the application side is protocols put aside is the most important, because unless this solves a real problem, what are we doing it for? You know, you're playing with your navel or something. At any rate, this just occurred to me as I was listening to the three of you, and maybe Melton could wordsmith this a little bit, but perhaps instead of us as a community using the term trustless, which, by the way, in my generation, I'm a baby boomer, I confess, but also the young people, they don't, every time an app doesn't work, which how many is that? Legion, okay? They don't trust the technology, all right? So that's not working. If we use something like enhanced trust, blockchain enables enhanced trust.
Well,
or
trustless is actually negative, right?
Yeah.
It means no trust.
trust.
I say trust minimized.
Okay, that's good. But something other than trustless, because that just doesn't work. I cringe when I hear it. I think you guys are onto something. That wasn't really a question, I guess.
It kind of.
There was
yeah,
actually,
it
I did
was.
have
There
a
was-
question
there
when I
was a point,
first thought of it, but I was thinking it through as I was asking the question, so my
Right.
apologies. But anyway, I loved what I heard.
When I used to moderate panels like this, I used to say, like, there's only one rule when you're asking a question: just make sure it ends in a question mark. But I mean, even the ones that don't, it spurs us to.
I
to think.
apologize.
It's all good.
That's great.
Yeah.
I think the one thing I would say, so I agree with you, I think trustless is kind of a misnomer. I think it's like people saying, oh, digital currencies are anonymous. Well, they're absolutely not. They're pseudonymous. They're two very different concepts. But I think, again, one of the hard parts is there's so much nuance and so many differences between all of these different things that seem small to us but are actually very meaningful. But the second piece is anytime new technology gets created, new language gets created, new syntax. And so one of the things the crypto community has done for a long time is taken existing words and given them new meaning. We've developed our own slang, and so unfortunately trustless seems to have reached escape velocity and is so widely used that we'll do our best. But I agree with you that syntax is hugely
Well, I think the three of you, as being leaders in this space and also being in the media, are in a position to perhaps either alter the language from trustless to, as you
trust minimized.
trust minimized, or do something, because that's not resonating. There's something here that isn't resonating, and I think that may be one of them. Thank you.
All right. Joven, there is another question over here.
Hi. There were three dominant crypto narratives we've seen in the last couple of years, right? So one is sound money, like Bitcoin. The second one is decentralized finance, where Ethereum has dominated. But there's also this notion of peer-to-peer markets without an intermediary that we all get excited about. It's the holy grail in which the big tech companies disappear and people have agency to log in and pay and own their data and all of that. So I have two questions. One is Tezos more aligned with some of these narratives than the others? And if so, which ones? And what do you actually think of peer-to-peer markets? Is it too much of a pipe dream, or do you think we are anywhere close to realizing some of that opportunity?
I can start on the markets side. I think on the markets front, there is still a lot of work that needs to be done around peer-to-peer marketplaces and trust minimized marketplaces. I think some of the more interesting applications are, I think eventually everything will be a marketplace. If you look at the majority of what's being built in Silicon Valley today, it's platforms and marketplaces. This idea of ecosystems and platforms, this is now sort of the dominant language. People think about, creating these platforms. Now people are imbuing these platforms that have already been built with their own exchange mechanism. They're trying to create more ways for people to interact. At its core, all technology does is connect people and ideas and enable them to interact in different ways, and that's all a marketplace does. So in my view, what's really interesting about Tezos, and people say Tezos and Tezos. What's the proper pronunciation?
It's a made-up word, so like, but I like when people pronounce it differently than myself and Arthur, because that shows that it's kind of working, right? Like,
Okay, I'm gonna say Tezos, but I hear
Yeah.
Tezos. I like it's fun, but I think on the marketplace front, that hasn't even been close to being tapped yet. I think one of the interesting challenges is there's obviously a lot at stake here with the legacy system, and so in the U.S. in particular, we've seen a lot of regulatory pressure when it comes to marketplaces. One great example I can think of is Open Bazaar OB1. What they're trying to do is kind of create the Pirate Bay or Napster equivalent for marketplaces, where it's basically just an open source protocol. Anyone can spin up a marketplace using their software client. But again, there are real limitations when what we're trying to build intersects with the existing system. There's a lot of friction there. So I think a lot of it's going to be around a public-private partnership and finding ways to get some of these peer-to-peer marketplaces into, say, like municipal finance, right? So bonds, for example, to build broadband infrastructure in underserved communities. That's a great use case where maybe it's not as contentious. We're seeing it around sustainability, people trading electrons using Brooklyn microgrids and Allo3 energy system. So I think things like that are less contentious are the starting point. But ultimately, once you have open source software, once you have resilient networks and resilient infrastructure, as we saw with peer-to-peer file sharing, it's really hard to stop once it starts. It's just finding a way to get it started. And I think Tezos could definitely be that starting point.
yeah, I mean, I have nothing to add there. Yeah,
Same.
That was really good.
Okay, we have time for maybe one or two more questions. Anybody else in the audience? If not, I have one last question. Since this is being recorded for posterity, so we have a virtual time capsule, and since this is the visionary panel, where do you see Tezos 5 years from now?
I want to see, so I've written about this, and I hate saying it, but I want to see a major contentious governance event, and I want to see some social network attacks on the Tezos network. I think it's going to be a great way to stress test whether or not the incentive mechanism works. And I think we haven't seen a lot of this, but I think there should be some event like this that tests the resilience of this idea and whether or not it works as intended.
So, well, that would be cool. I think when I think about Tezos in 5 years, what I'd like to see, and again, I'm coming at it from more of, I guess, like the community standpoint, is I think Tezos has been really committed to this philosophical idea of decentralization, as with all of crypto, but like, I think that's super important, but we said time and time again, like decentralization doesn't necessarily mean disorganization. And so when I think about Tezos in 5 years, I think about kind of us rallying together with a message that sells with verticals that make sense for us, and thinking less about like, I think there are a lot of smart people who will continue to think about the network and the tech, and that will continue to be important. But hopefully this will be so pervasive that people won't even think about it anymore at that point.
Yeah, I mean, if you read the Tezos position paper, the governance of the network is meant to be a means to an end. The end being, of course, like facilitating better technological upgrades. So my, hope for the network over the next 5 years is to fold in these innovations, not just from the applied cryptography side, but there's also a lot of cool things we can do using formal verification and some other cool hacks, with constitutionalism and different governance models, again, as a means to basically make sure that the best technology is folded into the protocol and to imbue different aspects of better money, right? So, I mean, I think we all know it makes good money. Fungibility would be great for starters. And so there's quite a bit there from the design space that we can look forward to, which are, firmly grounded in technical innovations, though I think obviously, as I hope was made very crystal clear in the position paper of Tezos from 2014, you do need some sort of formalized governance mechanism, at least in open source networks, to actually facilitate this, right? And so, my hope for Tezos is that, governance becomes the path to which we achieve better money. Better money will be measured by, its pervasiveness on the web and with people all over the world. So, we had a good start to this in 2017 when 30,000 people participated in the Tezos fundraiser. I think that that bootstrapped a fantastic network. I think that the choices and participation of people who continue to rally around this network is going to lead to better and better forms of money coming out of the governance mechanism. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we're not just trying to do this for the sake of some sort of exercise in political science. No offense, Allison.
None taken.
But we are doing this to create a better way to value transfer, right? So again, it's nice to talk about this from a philosophical perspective, but ultimately we're just trying to create a better technical product, and this is the hackneyed way that we've come about it in light of seeing that the sort of default mechanism for open source governance just doesn't really work that well for folding in innovation.
All right, so last call for questions. Otherwise, we'll wrap it up. We're going to have a little break again. Oh, Jovi, there's another question here. Just under the wire.
What we got? So, Meltem, I think you brought up corporate governance. One of the things we've seen is kind of like an aggregation of power to proxy advisory firms in, the public equities markets. What is to stop the same thing happening with Tezos bakers? And
Absolutely nothing.
there's a lot of off-chain dynamics, right, that come into play that may not be formalized through on-chain governance. So, have you guys thought through any of that? And is there any way we can maybe, drum up some tools that may kind of like avoid those negative incentives?
I think the starting point is looking at the data of how these systems are being used. And I think TZScan does a great job, but there are a number of different services that are emerging that are going to provide data around how these governance markets with proof of stake protocols are evolving, which I think is really helpful. Like, let's understand the network topology and how it's evolving to understand whether or not we should have concerns about centralization that may go unseen. I think the other thing is there are a lot of great tools that are being developed to allow people to self-bake. In Athens, obviously, proposal A is lowering the roll size to 8,000 Tezos, which is one such step as well. It's lowering the financial barrier to participating directly. But I do think this is a significant concern. It's one I've had for a long time. It's one of my biggest criticisms of on-chain governance is, in a way, these systems can begin to resemble plutarchies. Right? Where the rich get richer and consolidate and aggregate power. But I think, again, if you're aware of it, then you can build in measures to counteract it. And I do think in the Tezos community, there has been a lot of good dialogue around what types of tools we need to introduce. I think the design of Tezos, it's really easy to switch delegations. So if you don't like what your baking service is doing, you just change the address and you can delegate to someone else. So I think that's a really wonderful feature that a lot of other delegated proof of stake protocols don't have. But I think, again, it's really about understanding how the network topology evolves over time and making changes. But all of us in this room are collectively responsible for doing that, which is why I like to highlight some of the ironies of decentralization culture. But again, it's up to all of us collectively to continue to actively monitor what's happening and design countermeasures.
Yeah, I mean, I had a blog post, I think, from 2017 that is called, like, The Myth of the Irrational Token Holders, where I do draw some comparisons between, like, corporate governance ideas and, like, Tezos is a weird animal for a variety of reasons, not least which is, like, there is this notion of a digital polity that is actually, very real, but then there's obviously themes from corporate governance that we can hearken to that look kind of similar. But, ultimately, at the end of the day, like, you're only shooting yourself in the foot if you really try to, like, mount a coup or something like that. And it's kind of an active futility. I mean, the other thing that works in our favor, and I think this is also mentioned in the position paper, is, like, there's certain diseconomies of scale around proof of stake that fundamentally make it, like, a little bit less susceptible to these types of actors. And that's just, the consensus mechanism. Like, obviously, this is all subject to change given the agnostic nature of the protocol itself. At the end of the day, with the ability to substitute in and out different innovations. So, I mean, honestly, if people don't want this thing to work, it's not going to work. If a critical mass of people just decide to, like, see the world burn, that's going to happen. But fundamentally, I think, like, the incentive structure of proof of stake.
Should I get my Joker mask an hour later?
Oh, I'm surprised you didn't in your talk. But
I was told to behave today. So
yeah, thank you. But yeah, no, I think fundamentally, like, there's a lot of bare bones here that lend itself to, to resiliency against those types of attacks that aren't necessarily present in, like, the first generation of cryptocurrencies.
All right, well, that was the last question. Great panel. Once again, big hand for our presenters.